afternoon. I'm Jess Eichens, and we are here at the Hallberg Center for the Arts today. We have a new show up this month. William Z. Linmark is an amazing artist. The show this month is called Imaginary Encounters. It is sponsored by Delta and the Boersma family, so we want to be sure to thank them. And also, of course, the East Central Regional Arts Council. We have the artist here to interview, and we're very excited about it. So let's go meet William.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the Hallberg Center for the Arts for putting up this show, and also my sponsors, the Boersma family, and of course Delta Airlines for putting up this show. I was born in the Philippines, grew up in Hawaii. I started working as self-taught artist at first, living in San Francisco during, I would say, the early 1990s is when I started to think about maybe doing an exhibition in a gallery with the self-taught arts that I was working on. So these are the first artworks that I tried to go into a gallery, to exhibit in a gallery, was the Barry Smoking and Les Deux Amis, which is two friends, and also the guitar player. So I went to three galleries, and two of them wanted to represent my works at this early stage. So I figured, oh, that's something that I think I want to do professionally as an artist. So what you see in this room are early works of as being a self-taught artist before I went to get my academic classes, which will go into the next grouping, which is the Portraits of Paris.
Sure. So all of these pieces, did you create them all kind of around the same time? Were you in San Francisco when you created these pieces, or?
Yes, it was during around this time with what you see in this room. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by writers, one of them being my brother, he's also a writer, and also other artists and painters as well too. So with that, I was being more kind of like inspired to look into like a larger realm of artworks from especially the modern painters that were living in Paris during the 20s that shape up the modern world. Yeah. So you'll see a lot of cafe artworks that's starting to take place in my early stages in my career.
Right, I noticed that in the other area of the gallery. Let's go take a look at those pieces, and you can tell us about those.
These two portraits are kind of like significant, and it's a great thing that they did put it together. Because you'll see like this self-portrait that I did in the beginning part of my career, before my academic ones, you'll see the difference between a self-taught artist.
So this is even before you're academic?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
This is when I was doing that. You'll see like a flatter surface compared to when I started taking my classes at University of Hawaii, which you'll see like the underpaintings and layers of artworks that go. There's probably 9 layers of oil paints in here.
Wow.
So, compared to like a flatter surface that I was working on in the beginning.
Wow.
So those are the distinctions that you could kind of like see, you know, between a self-taught artist and being academics. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. There's a pregnant part that I want to point out. What made me think about going back to school to take my degree was probably teaching kids to like with art classes and stuff. And this is actually a collaboration with my then 6-year-old nephew. Fun. Yeah, he was all into like the whole opera theater scene thing, so I incorporated it to a guitar. And that's our Phantom of the Opera scene that we were doing. So.
That's wonderful, and how great to be able to work with your nephew as well.
Yeah, so I like working with kids. Their imagination is just you know, out there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one's here. This is part of the early works of the artworks. I did first with no faces because then the viewer, when they look at it, right away they kind of like have that impression of what the guitar, you know, the musicians look like in their own visions. So that's why I created the no faces. So
I like that.
It's almost kind of like you can see it right away what their expression on their faces are. So.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. So talk to us a little bit about your Parisian works then.
So the Parisian work, like I said, I was inspired by my friends in San Francisco at that time. I was being exposed to more culture in European culture then. It goes into my Portraits of Paris, which is the next one over. So this is the second grouping that we're doing. Again, these are portraits of expats and artists living in Paris during the 20s. And you'll see more now the inspiration that I was getting through other modern artists like Picasso, Modigliani, the abstract expressionists, the impressionisms. And so I was doing a lot of portraits of writers and artists.
So are these writers from your history, or are these writers from history?
This from history, actually.
Okay.
Those are mostly like expats that I was doing.
Okay.
Writers of expats living in Paris then. Like you'll see Janet Flanner, Sulita, Gertrude Stein, and yeah. And also within this grouping, I started to do commission works also too. So this one here, with the exception of this painting, this is actually a friend of mine, Sulibari, Susanna, and I kind of like integrated it into the cafe because we both kind of like that cafe scene. Yeah.
So it's kind of a combination of your history and history.
Correct. Yeah. So then you'll see more kind of like as I was producing all this artwork, I started getting that more kind of like identifying my own work that I wanted to parlay into the artworks that I've been working on. Yeah.
Now,
that stylization.
Right. I like that. The next segment that you have featured here at the Art Center is the narratives. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's walk over to where you have some of those.
So the narratives is on the third groupings. So now we're going into more my academics. I'm at this point into my academic session.
Okay.
And this part was going back to school. It was a little bit more challenging because now it's not just portraits anymore. You have to come up with a concept of what you want to pursue into the arts and parlay what's going on around you, the environments, what social issues and stuff that's going on. This one here is ode to Oscar Wilde. So this concept here is about the little boy looking into the prison of Oscar Wilde, who was put into prison for sodomites being gay. And this is with that. And what you see are little narratives of his collection of stories, and including being, this time, like being gay and homosexual, being accepted into the society. So this is one of that portrait. This one here, Sortie. This is actually kind of like one of my strongest concept pieces that I thought that I was working with. This is about sortie, it means exit. This is about the 5 kids during, I think this was in around 2010, when the 5 kids were cyberbullying each other, and 5 of them committed suicide within a week. So, and then you see the connection being separated at the end, which just like being the disconnect. There's actually portraits of the actual kids that used to work in mines, coal mines, and they're being separated from their innocence. Their innocence being taken away, and their only way out was the sortie exit. So, right behind you, since we're here, this is still part of the narrative one, since it's here. This one is Bar Fitzgerald. It's an actual bar in the south of France. And this is actually was in one of my brother's book cover.
Really?
Yeah, so this was printed as a book cover. One
nice.
Of his books. So he's known more for his Rolling the R books that's being studied in universities and schools.
Okay.
So it's about the gender thing that he's, getting also too, which is interesting because this one's also another part of the Oscar Wilde theme. This is the Salon of Oscar Wilde, Salon Rouge, Part of the narrative, Alice in Wonderland. So this is still, this too here is part of my, my projects of being in academic classes. One of them is mathematics. This is an interesting story. It's about, during that time when I was in school, algebra was one of my not not so forte with math, you know.
We all
So,
have strong points.
yeah, so my professor Max actually said, well, in order to understand algebra, which that subject at the time I was taking, he said you need to understand the numbers and what they translate to. So this one I envisioned sort of like shaman type nature wood guy that was going into the woods, and what he's doing was he's actually going out to try to capture numbers, and he takes them home and kind of like trains and befriends the numbers and try to get to understand them more. And then so that's how I envision getting to know mathematics.
Is that what brings us to the bird cage?
Correct, yeah. These are numbers, and these are his captured, the numbers that he captures throughout the nature history. And this actually moves. This one right here. So I like things that sort of like almost kind of like you can envision kind of like going into reality.
Wow.
You know, yeah. So that's my mathematics.
Nice.
This one, chance meeting between a shaman and a horticulturist. And this is just a story about discussing what's going on with the environment. It's sort of like kind of like what's going on with our environment now, and opposed to what's going on from the history.
So you have a lot to say in your art, which is really nice. You've got pride, you've got environmental issues, you've got history.
And cyberbullying.
And cyberbullying, yes, yeah. So I really love what you do. So talk to us about your next category
speaking
here.
of social subjects,
Right.
yeah. So we're going into the fourth grouping, which is my identity. It's called. I debuted these pieces in Paris last November at the Arbello Gallery in Paris. This is about identity issues. I remember growing up as a kid, I used to play these paper dolls, you know, and like cutouts and dress-ups and stuff. And so how can I parlay that and interpret that into like what I'm working with now? And that's when I started going back also to minoring, because I minored in African arts and indigenous art history. And so I wanted to tie all those things together, you know, and so this is what I came up with was, how does it reflect me as an artist, you know, with my identity, being gay and stuff. So this is I call this the identity, which is being, you know, put out. This piece right here, it's Ship of Fools, but it's also part of the Encountering the Others, which is one of my final pieces that I worked with my BFA, Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Hawaii, was Encountering the Others, and that's about oligarchs, the power of oligarchs trying to capture smaller states. And me being born in the Philippines and growing up in Hawaii, both colonized states. So with that, these powerful, you know, oligarchs were imposing their own beliefs upon smaller states.
Right.
In Hawaii, before colonialism came, being gay and mahu, the identity comes to play again, was very much accepted then, you know, because they were able to see both sexes, male and female. So that was a very special thing for the Hawaiian culture back then. But with the incoming of colonialization into Hawaii, that sort of kind of like Christianity came about, and it's like, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. So, yeah. So now I'm taking it back to being what's accepted now into our society, and
I'd love to show everybody the runway because I think that is so much fun.
Oh yeah, this runway, I think this is really cool how you guys put these pieces up here on this railway, because you can see the back of it and the front of it. But opposed to just hanging beside on the wall, because when I debuted this in Paris, it went like on the top of the walls part. Yeah. But this way, you're able to, like, you know, it's almost kind of like floating in midair. So this is my fun pieces, and you'll see that each work of those, it's a collage pieces, but you'll see an African and indigenous art integrated into each piece. So and then it just takes off from the identity in that part. Yeah.
So I would be remiss not to mention that, of course, most of these pieces are for sale. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Some of these pieces are for sale.
Right.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that, you know, the viewers see that really jumps out at them, be sure to stop by the Hallberg Center for the Arts. Now, this show runs through mid-July.
July 18th.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
I think July 18th is the last day of the show. So it would be great to have people come down. We've got a limit of the number of people who can be in the Art Center at one time. I think 15, including volunteers, and everybody is required to wear masks.
Yep, there's masks, and that's provided if they forget their own, to bring their own.
Yep, masks and hand sanitizer. So we're keeping everybody safe, but we're still wanting everyone to be able to see all the amazing work that you have done. Now, how long have you been an artist, William?
I think, like I said, probably as a young child, I was already sort of sketching, but with the self-taught, and I started going to take it more professional as an artist career, probably in early 1990s is when I started doing that, so a few years ago, yeah.
So just a couple years ago.
A couple years ago, yeah. Yes.
Is there a type of art that you prefer working on over others?
I think it's mainly what I'm working on now that I'm interested in.
Right.
But I tend to somewhat diverge back to the portraits of Paris because that's sort of like I would say like maybe my escape from what's going on, you know. Then I would go and tackle some sort of like the social narrative storytelling issues and stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, because that's more kind of like it takes something out of you when you do that, you know, storytelling thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like writing a book. But then I do tend to like go back into it for some reason. Like putting up this show, it took me this maybe 6 months to kind of like looking at like some of the older pieces and trying to like go back and retouch things, you know. Yeah, so I guess one artist said it's never done until it's done.
Right.
You never know when that is.
Yeah. Do you ever like look back at a piece that you've done, you know, 10 years ago and say, I need to touch that up? Or do you tend to just leave them? If you come back to them?
Especially the self-taught ones, I tend to leave it because there's something about
history.
Yeah, there's something about that, you know, because it's like once you've taken classes, you have this keen eye now of being meticulous and like, no, the figure, the proportion's not right, and you're trying to, when you're doing as a self-taught artist and you want to just create and paint stuff, you kind of like want that separation to like have that freedom of expression, expressing your brush paints. So, yeah.
And it shows your growth as well.
Yeah, but with the, you know, now that you know stuff, it's like, you know, when can you separate those two things? So, yeah. And I think Picasso was having a hard time doing that when he started going back and painting as a child, you know, yeah. Probably my first inspirations were actually writers, like my brother Dan and two other, Lisa Sagi, Justin Chin, and then Kathy Chang was also a painter. So with that integration, when I was first kind of like trying to, you know, say something with my artwork, with my painting, I was already getting inspired by those sort of like other mediums out there with writings and performance arts and stuff. There are particular, it goes back to the modern arts where Modigliani was a strong you know, inspired from his works, and of course Picasso, you know, the breakthrough of modern, you know, to see the abstract and you know all that. So
when we were putting up the show, I was like, I see a little bit of Picasso in here.
Oh yeah, yeah, like that whole generation with the whole gang of Gertrude Stein. That actually, that large painting there is a salon of Gertrude Stein, and with his collections of then, you know, of Picasso and all those other arts Cézanne and stuff. Yeah. So I was very much influenced by that whole Paris theme of what was going on in the earlier the century. So, yeah, those were my big influences and inspirations that I look into.
Yeah. And now we are entering the underground gallery where William has even more pieces of artwork down here.
So this is called Encountering the Others. This is what I did for my finale for my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Hawaii. And this is about the oligarchs that I was explaining to you upstairs, going into taking over the smaller states with their peaceful, what's going on. And they're trying to protect their own land and states. With this, you see like measles being introduced, different diseases. But with this, there's such a vast concept in the Ship of Fools that I was working on. But with the identity, what I wanted to do was just pick one of what's going on in this little boat. And this was about the religion that was being connected to Christianity and being homosexual and gay. And what's going on with identity up there, When I did this piece, these were about 5-6 feet for this large piece here. Then it goes on and covers the entire wall.
Oh, so there's more to it?
Oh, this is just, I did this particular piece just for the Paris show because I wanted to correlate this with identity. Yeah. So I made this one just for that. It's for that specific show. But there's actually a whole series of Encountering the Others that I'm working on. It goes, but it's on a larger scale. Sure. The concept of the whole Ship of Fools. Actually, when you were talking about inspiration, it goes back not just from Paris portraits, but it goes back to like the medieval times during what was going on then. I was reading a book called Ship of Fools by Sebastian Brandt, and that sort of like gave me the idea of this this group of people, group of nomads traveling to certain places and creating havoc as they go along. Right. But I wanted to do an intake of that where they're just like leaving their garbage and polluting, as they go to the States and stuff. So. And speaking of other inspirations you were talking about, Marilyn Monroe was another inspiration.
Yes, I saw that one when we were putting it up too. Marilyn.
So this is called Notes to Marilyn. This one right here. So it's again, it's a takeoff from that whole abstract with Picasso, Braque, Cézanne. That whole concept of it, so So you'll see like different varieties of paintings and artworks that I do, and it all depends on what I'm currently inspired on when I work.
So there's a little bit of everything for people to come down and enjoy.
Yeah, there's even scenes from places in Paris, Shakespeare and Company, the bookstore. Le Panagio, the Chat Noir, Le Chat Noir. It's all cabaret.
I don't know, this makes me want to travel. So the people who are missing traveling right now because of the pandemic, they can come here and do a little bit of traveling while they're at home.
That's actually, that's one thing that I told my friends, since I can't travel to Europe right now, and look, because I like to travel and visit other exhibitions. I said, "Oh, let me create my own world and bring it to me, to myself, and create my own exhibition." So this is how it came about.
And to communities that you're able to show the art.
Yeah, exactly, and especially supporting smaller rural communities, and that's what I like to do. Someone asked me that in one of my committee interview was why Wyoming. And I thought that when supporting outside of the city, those little communities are actually the backbones of this bigger, massive states that we live in. So, so it's a great support for support your local communities. Oh, these are more portraits of Paris that you see. Speaking of Gertrude Stein, she was one of my main influence with my art, actually, because with the book Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, she talked about other artists that were coming to visit her salon every Saturday evenings. So they would all gather at her place and talk about everything. And so that kind of like, reading that book was like an eye-opener. And so I wanted to recreate that whole scene. Jean Cocteau, I'm fascinated about his works also too. There's two variations of Jean Cocteau's portraits. This one here at a young age, and then this one as an abstract painting. It's called Opium. He was addicted to opium then. So this was my takeoff on that. More artist-writer, Juna Barnes, Adrienne Monnier, Renee Kisling. when I was 18, then I started, I want to venture to other places. So I lived in New York, Seattle, California, New Orleans, and then I wanted to go into Europe, was then calling during that time. So just traveled around different places in Europe. I like to meet other people, their cultures. It gives me a lot of inspiration to my work.
Are there other places in the Twin Cities area that you show your work, or do you have a studio that's open to the public, or?
When I first moved to the Twin Cities, I think 1998, Gene Stephen Galleries used to represent my work, and also Art Resource Gallery were two that represented my work. Then I went back to Hawaii, did my academics, and then came back with Gene Stephen Gallery. But now that he's closed, so I'm just doing a lot of, looking for call arts.
Yeah. Gallery shows like this.
Yeah,
Yay.
Exactly. Yes.
So William, while we're at it, do you have any advice for artists during COVID or just upcoming artists?
Yeah, I think it's great that there's a lot of platforms that artists can go and seek other opportunities that they can do for themselves, and also helping out the community right now too, that's like starving for arts and exhibitions. So because there's a lot of precautions that when you do a lot of when putting up an art exhibitions like this. So I encourage that very much for other artists to do that.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming and showing your amazing artwork here at the Hallberg Center for the Arts, William. This piece, all the other pieces, there's a story to everything. So I would love to invite people to please come down. Our hours, Thursday and Friday, 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and then Saturdays from noon to 4. And thanks again to Delta Airlines and the Boersma family for sponsoring it. And
thank you for the Hallberg Center for the Arts for putting this show up. Yeah.
Of course. So come on down to Wyoming and see William's show.